sure that was a milliliter. Yep. So while I'm waiting, let's check the pH of this. Probably still acidic. Fairly strongly acidic, as you can see. Quite red. So that layer is toast. Don't need it anymore. Waiting for those layers to clear up. Looks pretty good. Top layer is still a little cloudy, but by the time I'm done transferring, it'll probably be fine again. Bottom layer out. And as before, if I accidentally take a little bit of the top layer with it, I can just leave it in the pipette. And just a tiny little bit more. And we'll drip that aqueous layer in. And transfer the remaining top layer back. Add our third wash. Should get less CO2 generation this time. May need a fourth wash, so I got an extra milliliter there in case I do. And we still will get some CO2. Cap it up, mix and vent, mix and vent. You want to keep the mixing and venting until you don't hear it hiss when you open up the vent. Let that settle. And while that's settling, we can measure the pH of this second water layer. I expect it to be acidic, but less so. Okay, so you can see that it's not quite as bright red. Put those side by side. So we don't need that one anymore. And if I'm lucky, that means that the third wash will not be acidic anymore. We have to make sure the acetic acid's gone or it will interfere with the distillation. Waiting for those layers to clear up. I want them to be completely clear on this last wash so I don't lose any of my ester in the water layer or take any of my aqueous layer, or take as little as possible of my aqueous layer into the organic so I don't waste it by adding too much drying agent. Pretty clear. Top layer is going to be a little cloudy until I add the add it to the sodium sulfate. We're taking that bottom layer out again. And just let it settle. Squirt the bottom layer into the beaker, and then that residual top layer that's in the pipette can be returned to the centrifuge tube. And then we'll see if this is still acidic. Yeah, it's not too acidic. It's not basic either. So I think I am going to do a fourth wash. Really shouldn't be much bubbling this time, because we should have gotten rid of almost all of the acid. But you can see there is still some CO2 generation, so we did not quench all of the acid. With the 3 washes. That's a good sign. No hissing even on that first inversion this time. And we'll let that settle. Grab another beaker. Time you open and close the door and the glassware moves. So it's taking a little longer to break. It's also a good sign. Means I got a nice mix. So while we're waiting, I'm going to get a label. That's going to store in the fridge so the ester doesn't evaporate. DCL-10-50A. Oops. Easier to tape it on if I actually attach it first. If you look at that carefully, you can see that there's still a little bit of mixture, a little bit of bubbling. I'm going to break up some of those bubbles by reaching in with the little spatula. Let's give it a gentle stir at the interface to try to get those bubbles of ester out of the water layer. So I don't get any carryover acid. Rinse my pipette a couple of times in water. Get bottom layer out. Drip the bottom layer out, and then we'll return the little bit of top layer that's in the pipette. And let's verify that that's not acidic. Okay, so now you can see that it's clearly not red anymore. That's a good sign. So 4 1 milliliter washers got the job done. In the lab manual, I believe it tells you to add the drying agent to this tube, but you can see there's a lot of water on the sides of the tube, so we will end up having to use less drying agent if instead of adding the drying agent to the tube that's already wet, we add the contents of the tube to a nice dry centrifuge tube. Hold those so they're nice and close to each other. Pull that out of there. I lose a little bit in the pipette, but less than I would lose by using extra drying agent. So we're going to cap that up, and we're going to mix it thoroughly. We want to make sure that it's clear, not cloudy. We still have a little bit of drying agent that kind of bounces around, and I may have to add a little bit more to accomplish that. We don't want any water when we do our distillation next week. That looks pretty clear to me. Pale yellow, very, very slightly yellow. And not cloudy anymore. So we're just going to parafilm that up and stick it in the freezer. And I already have a box in there that has some samples from a later lab, from later in the semester. So I'll just add that to the box. Some of these esters are pretty volatile, so I'm going to store it in the freezer so we don't lose any to evaporation. That's why I power filmed it. So that's it for now for the unknown alcohol.